Okay. I'll go ahead and share my screen. This is going to be a fun one. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So here we go. So class 2, we're going to go over wound management and injury assessment. And we're also going to go over environmental hazards and medical emergencies. Okay. Okay, so introduction to wound management. Basically, we're going to understand what handling a wound out in the wilderness looks like. We're going to go over fundamentals of effective wound management in the wilderness. And briefly, we'll go over wounds, cleaning techniques, dressing methods, and overall care practices. Okay. Okay. So common wounds in the wilderness. So we're just getting some feedback. So I'm just going to mute the here. Oh, okay. Great.
That was me. I switched from my phone to my laptop.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Okay. I'll jump right back to it. Okay, common wounds in the wilderness, part 1. We're going to go over abrasions and lacerations. Abrasions, superficial wounds caused by friction against rough surfaces. Lacerations, deep cuts or tears in skin, often irregular. Okay, now puncture wounds caused by objects piercing the skin, creating small deep holes. See the image on the left. And then avulsions. That's my first time ever actually saying that word out loud. Occur when the entire structure or part of it is detached from the body. Okay, so proper techniques for wound cleaning. Quickly, we'll just go over some tools, some ideal tools to have. You're not going to always have those in the wilderness, so keep that in mind. Sterile water or saline solution, antiseptic wipes, gloves, right? And procedures. Gently wash wounds, avoid harsh scrubbing, and use of antiseptics on the actual wound. Right. Quickly jump over to dressing techniques. Again, I'm happy to share all these slides afterwards for whoever isn't able to actually watch. Materials, we've gauze pads, bandages, adhesive tapes, and hydrogel dressings. And techniques. We're going to cover the wound, secure it, protect it, and ensure that we're covering the wound. It's not too tight. Again, we have a little diagram on the right. I know it's kind of tough to teach this over a video call, but okay, wound care practices, best practices and common mistakes. We're going to touch on best practices here later in the slide deck. Regular monitoring, keeping the wound clean and dry, and we're going to go over some obvious mistakes, using the wrong materials, ignoring signs of infection, etc. Okay, so basics of injury assessment. We're going to go over the look, listen, feel method. Has anybody heard of the look, listen, feel method before?
Yeah.
I'll take that as woohoo. Okay, we got
Yes.
one. Okay, sweet. We got two. We got two alive. Woohoo. Okay. So look, survey the scene, ensure safety before approaching, visual assessment, check for visible injuries, distress signs, and normal chest movements. We're going to look at facial expressions, observe for pain or distress. Now we're going to jump over to listening. We're going to listen for breathing, breathing difficulties, gasping, wheezing, a verbal response. Are they conscious? Are they talking to you? Listen for any sounds that may be coming from them. And now we're going to jump on feel. Breathing, feel for air movement, breath on your cheek or hand. Pulse, assess pulse at wrist or neck for heart rate and rhythm. And then skin, we're going to feel for skin temperature, Moisture, cold, clammy skin may indicate shock. Okay, so now we're just going to jump on to how to prioritize injuries for emergency situations. Okay. Threat to life, airway, ensure that the airway is open and clear. An obstructive airway can lead to death within minutes. Breathing, check if the casualty is breathing. I don't know if I have used, it's maybe not the best choice word now that I'm reading out loud. Let's not call them a casualty, but check that the person is breathing. Address any issues immediately. Circulation, look for severe bleeding, stop major blood loss. That's critical to basically keep the person alive. Pretty straightforward. Don't want to bleed out on you. Severity of injury. Visible severity. Evaluate injuries for profound bleeding, bone deformities, or burns. Functional severity. Assess if the injury impairs body functions like mobility, sight, or other critical capabilities. And now when we're prioritizing, we're going to consider the potential for long-term disability. And the first thing you're looking at is recovery impact. Consider injuries that, if they're not treated, are going to lead to a long-term disability. So you're going to be looking at things like spinal fractures, severe fractures, and then quality of life, gauges the potential impact on the casualty's future quality of life based on injury. Okay. And we'll skip this Q&A and we'll just double it up on the next Q&A because people jump on as I go through this. Okay. Now this is really what I want to dive into is environmental hazards and medical emergencies in the wilderness. So we're going to be going over environmental challenges, overviews and risks. We're going to go over common environmental hazards faced in wilderness settings, and then an introduction to types of environmental risks and the importance of preparedness. Okay. So again, I know this is kind of boring, but you know, if you learn one thing, that'll make it worthwhile. So bear with me here. So let's jump right into it. We'll look at handling hypothermia. Symptoms of hypothermia. I'm guessing everybody on the call has probably had mild hypothermia before. I'm sure Tony, I'm sure coming from Chicago, you've been cold before. I guess. Maybe not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Weird. Okay. Anyway, so mild hypothermia. I mean, this can happen. Honestly, something like this can happen. All you have to do is maybe go swimming on a very cold day, and you'll feel something like this: mild hypothermia. Dizziness and hunger, nausea, faster breathing, difficulty speaking, shivering. We're looking at moderate to severe slurred speech or mumbling. Excuse me, confused and poor decision making. You hear these stories of people, they get so cold, they start stripping, like taking their clothes off. That's terrifying to me, but that's apparently how it goes. Drowsiness or very low energy, weak pulse, then slow or shallow breathing. Okay, so immediate actions to take. You're going to want to remove wet clothing, replace with dry, warm clothing immediately. Insulate, use blankets if you have them. Something that I carry with me on through hikes, it's called like a bivouac sack or a bivy bag, or some people call it a space blanket. At the end of the day, it's an emergency blanket, basically. And they're only about, I don't know, $10. So really worth having. I don't know how many ounces they are, but they're very light. They're less than a pound, maybe like quarter of a pound, something like that. So yeah, sleeping bags. If you have them, again, you might have a sleeping bag. If you get wet, that could be an option depending on the kind of bag you have. If it's artificial down or some kind of material that is like hydrophobic, it's not gonna, get wet. Some of the new quilts they make are pretty water resistant, filled with artificial down. It says I have newspapers here. I don't think that's really practical. I don't think you're going to have newspapers. But anyway, the goal is to insulate the person's head and neck. Provide warm beverages. The person is conscious. Provide a warm, sweet, non-alcoholic beverage to help increase the body temperature. So again, like if you're backpacking, if you're camping, this could be something like, coffee and sugar. You don't want it to be too hot. Again, if the person's not necessarily conscious or they're drowsy or low energy or confused, you don't want to burn them. I've been in a situation, this wasn't in the backcountry, but I've been in a situation where I accidentally burned somebody, and it was really traumatic. It took me a while to get through that. So you don't want to deal with that. But if something like that happened, the person wasn't able to communicate, they were burned, wasn't good. Anyway, shelter, move the person to a warm shelter as quickly as possible. Again, you're backpacking, you're in the backcountry. That could be the bivy bag, the sleeping bag, maybe your tent. Anyway, wherever you can get them immediately. Then seek medical help. Again, if you're backpacking, you might have cellular service. If you don't have cellular service, that could be something like a satellite phone. Excuse me. If it's really severe, I know something that we talk about now is like the say like the iPhones, the new cell phones, they have an SOS feature. Again, what that SOS feature does for you is going to depend on the region you're in, and if the person on the other end of that SOS can actually receive it, because you don't know what these local fire departments or ambulance dispatchers, what have you, police departments, you don't know what they can actually encode or decode. So you don't know if that message from your iPhone is actually going to like get to the person properly. So just keep that in mind. Something like a Garmin InReach Mini or a Garmin InReach or any InReach product or Spot device is still something we'd recommend. For whatever reason, I just still don't feel comfortable telling people that they can just rely on their little phone SOS. It just doesn't seem practical at this point. Excuse me. Anyway, now we're going to jump over to heat stroke. Has anybody on the call had heat stroke before?
Yes, I have, Justice. It's Neil here.
Hey,
before
Neil.
you get off hypothermia, before we wrap somebody up in a sleeping bag, get them out of their wet clothes, because that just makes it so. Get them naked and then wrap them in the bag. And if they're really cold, get in there with them. But wet clothes are just going to continue to keep them cold. So if they're cold and wet, get them in the dry place. And heat stroke, heat exhaustion sucks.
That's a good point. I have removed wet clothes on the slide, but I never thought, you're right. Like, you could jump in the sleeping bag with them. That's a super practical. Most sleeping bags could probably fit 2 people, so that's a really practical idea.
Well, it's all about sharing body warmth and getting them warmed up. And if you got your body is a 98-degree heater that you can put in with them when you don't have any other options.
I'm gonna make a note of that, Neil. I'll add that to the. Thank you, sir.
That was the preferred method taught in my paramedic program for warming cold people.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to my dinner and I'll mute you back for a bit.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Appreciate you. Okay, so anyway, great anecdote from Neil. If you guys don't know Neil, he was a paramedic and he was on the Appalachian Trail for about 6 months backpacking. So he's a great wealth of knowledge. Really good guy. Okay, now we'll jump to heat stroke. Again, heat stroke, high body temperature, over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's like 41 degrees Celsius. Altered mental state or behavior, confusion, agitation, slurred speech, nausea and vomiting, flushed skin, rapid breathing, racing heart rate. Yeah, so I've had heat stroke before. I might have talked about it in the last class I did, but it was brutal. I was delirious. I was in Honduras backpacking for a month, and I was in the back of a tandem kayak, and I just was going crazy. I couldn't even paddle in one direction to the point where the girl in front of me had to just like take the paddle from me. And I mean, she probably wanted to just knock me out, but it was brutal. And yeah, I ended up being in a tent for several days, kind of like in and out of consciousness. It was a good time. But yeah, it's not a good time. Anyway, so immediate action to take. Heat stroke's a severe medical emergency. So move the person to a shaded or air-conditioned area. In my case, you know, we didn't have satellite phones. We didn't have any communication. We were kind of part of a hippie commune, not a hippie commune, but like an economic project. Anyway, so I was in like tent for several days and basically in a towel and was not ideal. But anyway, ideally, use whatever you can to cool the person down, immerse in a cool bath, spray with a hose, sponge with cool water, apply ice packs or cold wet towels to the head, neck, armpits, and groin. Again, if you're in the backcountry, from my own experience, you're not going to have access to ice packs. You're not going to have access to what you necessarily want. But a big part of just being in the backcountry in general is adapting. So, you know, you might not have a sponge, but you might have a rag. You might have like a bandana. You might not have access to cool water, but even room temperature water from a lake or any body of water outside. Even if even if the water temperature isn't all that cold, just immersing that person in regular temperature water is going to bring their core body temperature down. And then yeah, hydrate. If the person is conscious and able to drink, provide cool water or an electrolyte drink. I'm going to jump down to another slide and come back. Sorry, guys, there's a lot of slides here. But just electrolyte, I think that's one thing that I know people don't necessarily. People have different ideas of what an electrolyte is. I don't know if that's because of like there's so many products out there, like electrolyte beverages like Saps or Gatorade or Powerade. But at the end of the day, we're saying we're fueled with electrolytes. We're just meaning get somebody common electrolytes, get somebody something like sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So that could mean, this is kind of strange, but you know, you might not have like liquid IV powder. You know, you may not have what you necessarily want, LMNT powder, you know, a packet or a product. So sometimes you got to get creative, right? Like maybe you have, I don't know, some kind of dried food, banana chips and salt, you know, sodium tablets. Maybe you have, you do what you can. I always carry emergency sodium tablets. That's just me. It's something you can consider. I mean, I don't really know I guess where I'm going with this is that, you know, don't wait. I'm assuming everybody would know this, but don't wait until you can get somebody like a Gatorade or, you know, don't wait until you can get somebody the best fix. Like try to get them some salt. That's probably what you're going to have on hand. Okay. Now, long-term management of exposure issues, dehydration. Symptoms here, we're looking at extreme thirst, less frequent urination, dark colored urine, fatigue, dizziness, and confusion. Again, immediate actions for hydration, provide water or oral rehydration solutions, frequently in small amounts. Rest, move them to a cool shaded area, and then monitor. You can continuously monitor for worsening symptoms. Some other symptoms here, you know, bad breath, dizziness, palpitations, fatigue, headache, less frequent urination, dry mouth, and then swollen tongue. Swollen tongue is one that you may not think. Okay, now we're going to go over frostbite really quick. Symptoms, we're looking at cold skin and prickling feeling, numbness, red, white, blush white, or grayish yellow skin, harder, waxy looking skin, clumsiness due to joint and muscle stiffness. Then immediate actions, we're looking at back here. Yeah, we're looking at Numbness, red, white, and bluish. Sorry, let me jump down. Joint, clumsiness due to joint and muscle stiffness, then immediate actions. Protect, get out of the cold and wind, walk on frostbitten feet, unless absolutely necessary. Gradual warming, warm the affected skin gently by soaking in warm water, 100 to 105 Fahrenheit or 37 to 40 degrees Celsius for 15 to 30 minutes. And then avoid direct heat. Do not use a heat lamp, heat pad, or fireplace for warming. And loose coverings. After warming, cover the affected areas with sterile dressing, separating affected fingers and toes. And there's just a little infographic on the right side of what that looks like. Okay, so this is the slide I really want to touch on. I know we talk about gear a lot. We do like an intro backpacking class. So we're just going to go over some safety planning for various environments and gear that can be included in your safety plan. So for forests, maybe some recommended gear, navigation tools. We're looking at, say, a compass, GPS, again, maybe your All Trails map, maybe your whatever you're using Gaia maps. We're also looking at things like bug repellent, the safety gear. Again, that might something, again, it doesn't really affect us as much here in Texas, but bug repellent doesn't just start and stop with like off bug spray. There's also permethrin, which is a product you can buy here at REI or Holder's Provision Co. Permethrin's really great. You're actually pre-treating your gear before you go out. So permethrin comes in a little yellow bottle. You spray all your gear, there's a bit of an odor, but after about 3 hours, it cures. And it's good for, I believe it's something like 6 weeks or 6 washes, something like that. And permethrin's going to keep a lot of unwanted critters away. The one that terrifies me the most are the ticks. So permethrin's going to keep ticks away. And the cool thing is it just oxidizes off the gear. You don't even smell it. And these are just other. I just want you guys to maybe open up your minds to the idea that there's more out there than just kind of the off bug spray. Then rain gear. I always pack. Again, there's 2 things I kind of pack in terms of rain gear. One is a trash compactor bag. So that goes. That's going to go in. Sorry, I just got a message through the chat. Anyway, I pack a trash compactor bag. That's to keep my backpack dry. I also pack a rain jacket, and that's intentional to that's intentionally packed on the outside of my pack, just in case it starts to rain. Never pack your rain jacket deep in your bag. And then a multi-tool. You know, I don't know if this one's as applicable. I mean, most of the backpackers I know that are decent will tell you that they don't even really pack knives. But a multi-tool could be maybe a pair of pliers, like a Gerber pair of pliers with a little knife that pops out, and then maybe a few other little tools, kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And we're gonna jump into mountains. Layered clothing for variable temperatures. Again, mountain weather is super unpredictable. We just did a group hiking trip to Utah, and it was absolutely bizarre. It was like sunny and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and then after we go hiking, we'd have to drive home through kind of like a mountain pass, and our elevation would change by, I don't know, a couple thousand feet. And at the top, you know, a couple thousand feet later, just complete whiteout. You know, so mountain weather is completely unpredictable, changes at different elevations. So you need to be prepared for that. Okay, now we're going to jump into sun protection. One thing I really appreciate after hiking through the Grand Canyon is polarized sunglasses. So, you know, keep that in mind. If depending on your hike, you're seeing absolutely no tree cover. If you're in the Grand Canyon hiking rim to rim to rim, for very few hours of that hike, let me change that. For a portion, a fraction of that hike, you're going to have any cover from the sun. So you got to go into that preparing to basically be beat down by the sun for the entire time. So that includes your eyes. So, even those like $20 Gooder sunglasses, I think they're called Gooder sunglasses at REI, those are polarized from my understanding, and those will probably do you just fine, but maybe keep some of the more decorative eyewear at home. And sunscreen, and a hat. Another thing that I could be better with sunscreen. If you guys can see me on the video, I'm kind of sunburned. But one thing that I see a lot of hikers do is they actually pack more than one kind of sunscreen. Again, that all depends on what you're doing. If you're through hiking for a long time and weight's a big issue, don't necessarily do this, but I see a lot of people carry two different kinds of sunscreen. They carry one that looks like a stick of deodorant that you kind of roll on. They carry another that's like a sun cream. The nice thing about the stick of deodorant sunscreen is that if the sun's beating down on you, you can still apply it and it doesn't necessarily sweat off. Excuse me. So that's a good tool in the tool bag to have if you can handle carrying the extra weight. And then high energy food. Something that our friend Erin, she runs a little backpacking nutrition company. It's funny, I was kind of asking her what's a great emergency food to have. And I never thought of this, but it makes perfect sense. It's powdered peanut butter. So you want something like powdered peanut butter, or maybe, pick your poison, so to speak. But have an emergency food. Again, I don't know how many thousands of calories you can fit into just, a quarter of a pound of powdered peanut butter. It's not ideal, but you never know. I'd rather have calories than starve. So if you can handle it, consider maybe packing something like that. And then an emergency shelter. Again, this is going to change depending on where you are. Something like a space blanket, or baby sack. So one thing I'll say is that an emergency shelter in a humid area versus a non-humid area. The humidity is going to determine what kind of emergency shelter you want. Keep that in mind. I don't have an anecdote about that, but I can tell you if you're in a really humid area like Florida, you're really cold, you throw on a Bivouac sack, you're gonna perspirate. It's gonna be terrible. That thing's gonna fill up with sweat. I know this is gross, but that's just the reality. So you might want something more open, like a space blanket in that kind of situation, so you can vent that out of it. In less humid environments, that's not going to be as much of an issue, but just keep that in mind. And then deserts, water, hydration supplements. Again, I mean, that could be whatever, liquid IV, LMNT, sodium tablets are totally fine. I like sodium tablets because of their cost. They're like 1 penny per tablet or something like that. And they just work for me. And then light, long sleeve clothing for sun protection. I'm actually wearing something like that now. I wish I'd worn this today because I got a bit sunburned, but it's a nice light, breathable, long sleeve material. Has little thumb holes and then a little hood. Again, this is great because like today we are in a high winded area. So if you have a long sleeve shirt with a hood, you don't have to worry about losing your hat, so to speak. I know we were at the top of Enchanted Rock today and some people were losing hats. I think Kara was one of them, actually. So the nice thing about having a long sleeve shirt with a hood is that you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to lose it. And over several weeks of backpacking, there's a good chance that things will get lost. And I feel like a hat is one of the first things to go. Excuse me. Okay. And also cooling bandanas or hats. Again, if it's, I'm not saying to have a hat. Having a hat's not a bad idea. If you have one of those big Tilly hats, Sometimes they have a little strap you can put around the chin so you won't lose them if it's really windy. And then some people like bandanas. It's totally valid. Another piece of safety gear, it's something that we touch on in the intro to backpacking class, is it's good to have a flashlight or headlamp that's rechargeable, but it's also great to have a flashlight, a redundant flashlight that maybe runs on batteries, because you just never know what charging looks like. And you can put a lot of hours of, you can get a lot of light out of a couple AA batteries. So I'd keep that in mind, maybe a redundant light that runs on batteries that you don't have to recharge. Okay. And now safety planning for various environments. Again, route planning. Inform someone about your planned route and expected return time, and be aware of natural landmarks and exit points. So I actually have a funny story that I just heard this week that validated criticism I had. Someone in our group was trying to find Hidden Slot Canyon in Palo Duro State Park, which is like 8 or 9 hours from Austin. And she's asked me, how do I get there? How do I get there? And, just having knowing how to get somewhere is just half the battle. So, and she kind of lost that battle before it started. So, if she'd, what ended up happening, she had kind of an idea of where she was going to go, her and her friend. Unfortunately, they weren't successful. They ended up hiking, I think, 14 miles, and her friend's feet ended up getting completely ruined. Her friend's okay, but they ended up pretty dehydrated, pretty pissed off. And, that friend is probably still healing from the blisters from a week ago. That's kind of a best case, worst case scenario, so to speak. But if she'd taken more time and thoroughly planned the route before she started, she could have mitigated a lot of this. So I guess what I'm saying is know before you go. Don't just go off a hunch. She was going off a hunch, up like a Reddit hunch or something, or Facebook hunch, or really have it planned out. I think she might have had one pin on Google Maps, but tell somebody your plan, know the landmarks, know the exit points, and just really define the route before you go. There's a great tool. There's a couple of great tools you can use. Something I just used the other day is called Google My Map. You can make the route on All Trails. You can make the route on Gaia GPS, which is another free app. There's another feature on All Trails called Live Share. We don't really use it in the group, but you could. You can share your live location on WhatsApp. Share your live location on your iPhone, but make sure people know where you are. In her situation, she was kind of going off trail and probably also trespassing to do this. So like the problem with that is because she was likely trespassing, it's not like she's going to tell the people at Palo Duro State Park, hey, I'm probably trespassing to go on this trail. You guys don't want me to go on. So, but you could, if you're not trespassing, you could tell maybe even the people at the park visitor center your plans. And they could maybe make a notation of it in your reservation details if you're in a Texas State Park or another state park. Okay, now weather checks. Check weather forecasts and alerts during the trip. Understand the implications of weather changes, flash floods in deserts, sudden storms in mountains. Adjust plans accordingly due to the latest weather update. So one free tool is, and I think everybody pretty much has access to this for free on their phones. It's like a weather radar. I don't know how many people.
Hey, Justice.
Yeah.
I lost you for a minute there, but I was trying to get into to say a lot of trails have a sign in and sign out sheet. So that's another good way to make sure that you don't, take a minute to sign in, and don't forget to sign out, because those rangers at the state parks and those other places will look to see who's still in there. So make sure if you sign in, you sign out, but at least it lets them know where to start looking for you if you're not out when you're planning to be.
Yes, that's a great point. Definitely use those tools. use those tools. They all help. You know, I think to add to Neil's point, you know, you can use more than one tool. Like it doesn't have to just be like, hey, my buddy John knows I'm going to be on this trail. You know, you could have multiple touch points, and those are all going to help your likelihood of being found or being rescued if something goes astray, or at least speed up the timeline. Excuse me. But yeah, sorry, weather checks. I think during the eclipse this week, a lot of people maybe used a weather radar for the first time to see where the clouds were. But that's something that you'll see a lot of season hikers do. So they won't necessarily just go on their phone and see if there's a little icon that says rain or sun. They might actually look at the weather radar and say, okay, this inclement, I can't say the word inclement, whatever. Scratch that word, but this shitty weather is coming in, and let's get out of here. So
Hey, and justice for long folks taking long hikes. The weather that you think you're going into is going to change 3 or 4 days down the road. I had the unfortunate experience in Massachusetts on the AT getting caught in Hurricane N.E.R.T, and not knowing it till I got to the top of the mountain and talked to someone. So again, check your weather and beware and take shelter appropriately.
yeah, wise words. Okay, so and I guess I'll touch on that. So adjust plans according to the latest weather. So, you know, again, that might mean canceling your hike early, but again, or taking shelter or taking another rest day. But those are all better plans than just, you know, bare knuckling it and dying in shitty weather or getting severely injured. All right. Again, I know this is a long slide, y'all, but bear with me. So we're just going to touch on, again, a few trail medical emergencies and then how to mitigate those. So again, we kind of looked at hypothermia and heat stroke. Excuse me, we haven't touched on altitude sickness. Excuse me, things like acute mountain sickness, HAPE, high altitude, so different high altitude sicknesses, HAPE and HACE. Symptoms range from headache to nausea to severe respiratory distress. Descend immediately. Oxygen, external oxygen may be necessary. Animal and insect bites, stings, venomous bites, snakes, spiders, stings, scorpions, jellyfish can cause severe allergic reactions and require immediate medical attention. Keep calm, immobilize the affected area, and seek help. One thing I've noticed in Texas is that, and there's maybe a couple different approaches on what to do after a sting, depending on your location. So, I mean, I could probably talk about that for quite some time, but it doesn't seem like the jury's necessarily out. Curious if anyone has any feedback, but it doesn't seem like the jury's necessarily out on what to do what to do depends on where you are. So if you're in a very isolated area, some people would argue that if you've had say a terrible venomous bite, get in your car, call for help. If you're in a more populous area, stay on the trail, don't move, lean on your side, call for help if you can, and wait for emergency response. So people have different perspectives on that. Again, I'm not a medical professional, but I'd say if you're in we're at Enchant, you're on a busy trail, you're bitten by, you can identify the snake for one. You identify its venomous, for instance. Consider calling for help, and that's a great one. Bring a whistle, blow your whistle, and anyway, kind of wait in place. But again, if you're in the middle of nowhere, you have a good feeling nobody's going to find you. You have a good feeling that, you know, the pearly gates are opening. Maybe do what you can to get back to your car or get that distress signal out, or again, to maybe even take yourself to the hospital if you can. Okay, so dehydration and water-related illness. I I heard an absolutely terrifying story about that from my friend in the Grand Canyon. He's been an outfitter there for almost 12 years, and he'd taken hundreds of groups down in the Grand Canyon, and they're just using these kind of basic water filters. And then one day, um, there's an outbreak of norovirus, and they didn't know. So their filter, their membrane filter, wasn't filtering out norovirus. So it ended up with many of them keeled over in the canyon, and that required a helicopter evac. So again, food for thought. Consider domestic travel insurance when you're going on an excursion like this. Your medical insurance policy may not cover $30,000 or $60,000 helicopter evacuation, but for $40 or $20, you might be able to get yourself a domestic travel insurance policy that's going to cover that. So keep that in mind. Force majeure, as we'd say in Canada, sometimes there's things out of your control that can and will happen. So be prepared for that. Anyway, so again, with water filtration, if you don't trust the water, it looks you have a bad feeling about it, consider multiple purification methods. Again, that could be the membrane filter, that could be iodine tablets as well. An old school way of doing it is like diluting bleach in the water. However you want to do it, but just consider that chemical treatment along with the membrane treatment. There's also a UV treatment. I've never done that though, so I don't really want to vouch for it, but I've heard that could also potentially be valid. Anyway, I was playing around with something called a Steri light the other day. It's like a UV light you put in the water, but I guess I don't know how I feel about it still, or I haven't looked at the research. Anyway, now trauma from falls or accidents. Injuries such as fractures, sprains, head injuries from falls, or climbing mishaps. You're going to want to stabilize the injury, prevent movement, and evacuate if necessary. Then wound infections, risk increases with improper care. Clean wounds immediately, apply antiseptics, and cover with scar dressing. Okay, so now real life scenarios. We're going to just look over some real life emergency scenarios. So this is from Yale Medicine. Anyway, Dr. Della Yestina says the most common ailments occurring in people who camp or explore the wilderness are gastroenteritis, from improperly treated or contaminated water, ankle sprains, broken bones, scrapes, and lacerations, as well as heat injuries such as heat stroke or heat exhaustion. From my own time in the outside, I can attest to most of these. I don't think I've seen any broken bones, but I've definitely seen everything else. Excuse me. And quickly, we'll just jump on some ways to mitigate these. Oops. Took my slides a little properly formatted. 1 sec. There we go. Okay, so gastroenteritis from contaminated water. So prevention, again, use a reliable water purification method. This can be boiling, filters, or chemical treatment, or it could be a mix. Like I said, it could be membranes and chemical treatment. Then we're going to jump to response. Stay hydrated and seek medical help if symptoms like diarrhea or vomiting persist. One thing that I recently learned is that, again, it depends. Some people may not agree with it, but if you're very dehydrated, and for instance, you believe there's a risk of giardia in the water, one of my friends who's been an outfitter for some time, he'd say that drink the water, get the giardia, take the giardia over the dehydration, get yourself out of there, because the onset for the giardia is several days. So again, that's pretty hardcore, and I hope nobody has to end up in that kind of situation. But just food for thought. Sometimes getting hydrated is, if you can get hydrated faster, then you can potentially get the waterborne illness. That could be the better It's like pick your health, I guess. Again, that's pretty hardcore, and you probably won't face that, or you won't face that at any excursions we do, but it's good to know. So now injuries like ankle sprains, broken bones, scrapes, and lacerations. Wear appropriate footwear, use caution on uneven terrain. It really surprises me how many people don't buy proper footwear for their feet. Again, if you have, again, I'm no foot doctor, not a foot doctor, but you can go, say if you're local in Texas, you can go to Austin, you can go to a place like Fleet Feet. I think it's free. Or even REI will probably help size you. And any place that sells shoes will kind of give you an idea of what kind of shoe you should buy. But there's some very simple fundamentals. What kind of shoe do you buy if you have a high arch in your foot or a low arch or no arch? Try to get the right footwear for you. Even I have a kind of not a mutation, but I have like a big pop out bone on the back of my foot. Like, it's worth talking to a couple different shoe salesmen, get their take on it. Okay, response. Again, for sprains, you can use the Rice method: rest, ice, compression, elevation. Again, if you're, say, camping in the backcountry, you end up with, like, say, something nasty. Maybe find a way to do this in your tent. Maybe there's a way you can kind of prop up your leg if it's depending on where the injury is in your leg. Maybe there's different tie downs or different places on the roof of your tent. Maybe find a way you can kind of attach your leg to that without compromising the tent structure. It all depends on the kind of tent you have. If it's like a freestanding tent. Okay, so now heat injuries, heat stroke, and heat exhaustion. Wear light breathable clothing, hat or a hood. Hydrate regularly. Frequent breaks in shaded areas. Avoid strenuous activities during peak heat hours. And then response, move to a cool area and rest. Rehydrate with water or sports drink containing electrolytes. Again, sodium tablets. I don't know if anybody carries potassium tablets or magnesium tablets, but you never know. It doesn't have to be the sports drink. Apply cool clothes to the body. Seek medical attention if symptoms escalate. Excuse me. Hey guys, we're almost there. Yeah, I just want to touch on some definitions really quick. I know it's dorky or boring, but these are things that I tend to find people have varied opinions on, so I'll just throw my definitions out there. So again, electrolyte, minerals in your body that have an electric charge. They're vital for various bodily functions, muscle contractions, nerve signaling, and hydration. Common electrolytes include sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And then peak sun hours, something I just wanted to define. Because again, I don't think a lot of our just day hikers on the weekend know what peak sun hours are. The period during the day when the intensity of sunlight is at the highest, typically between 10 and 4. Exposure during these hours increases the risk of sunburn, heat-related illness. Again, one outfitter I know in the Grand Canyon, there's certain parts of the year where hiking ends at 12. So they just hike in the morning. Again, that's just to mitigate things like the sunburn I have. That's things they're doing to mitigate a lot of heat-related illness. So keep that in mind. Again, hike your own hike, but if you know where you're looking at really hot temperatures, maybe try to get some of that movement done earlier in the day. Or fraction it. Totally up to you. But anyway, those are peak sun hours, typically between 10 and 4. Again, this also depends on the part of the world you're in. Chemical treatment of water. Definition: disinfecting water using chemical agents such as iodine, chlorine dioxide to kill bacteria, viruses, and some protozoans, making it safe for drinking. It's a common practice when hiking or camping where potable water is unavailable. Again, things you could add to that list. The chemical agents would be things like bleach, diluted bleach, and then hydrogel. This is just another one around gauze and bandages. And so this definition, a gel like, so yeah.
back on the the chemical treatment of the water. Just a reminder, if when you put those pills in, it's going to take about 30 minutes before you can drink that water. So don't run out before you have to make new water. And also the other thing I want to reiterate is don't just drink Gatorade or electrolyte solutions. I drink half water and half Gatorade. You know, one break I'll drink water, one break I'll drink Gatorade, and I alternate back and forth because too many electrolytes can also be dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's actually funny to jump on Neil's point. Something I don't cover, but it's definitely worth adding in, is just the different times for each one of these chemical treatments. When I was in Africa, so this is the first time I ever did chemical treatment of water. I did it completely wrong, and yeah, I ended up with terrible burns in my mouth because I was just drinking. I was putting the chemicals in and then drinking it. But what I did wrong is I just went to the local outfitter and maybe put too much faith into the sales guy and didn't do my own homework. So you can always do your own homework. Me and the person I was with ended up with these great chemical burns in our mouths, kind of like when you suck on a jawbreaker. Yeah, it was phenomenal. It's great. Yeah, make sure you wait the appropriate time. I even have some pills. I think the chlorine pills I used to have may have even said an hour, but I think the iodine tablets are just 30 minutes. And then hydrogel. A gel-like substance that can absorb and retain a significant amount of water. In medical applications, hydrogel dressings are used for wound care, providing moisture to the wound, which can promote healing and reduce pain. Perfect. Okay, guys. So that's it for tonight, pretty much. There we go, an hour and 8 minutes, the recording says. So I'm just going to open it up for a little Q&A if people want to ask questions. Otherwise, that's pretty much the class for tonight. But yeah, thanks for joining. I know I kind of sped run through that.
Hi, I have a question. I might have missed it because I might have missed it because I joined late. But when you are leading hikes, like say at Glacier coming up, do you carry some sort of first aid kit with you, or should folks each have their own first aid kits in their bag?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have first aid kits. You don't need to bring your own first aid kit. If you'd like to bring your own supplies, that's totally up to you. But yeah, we have rudimentary first aid we bring, along with satellite communication devices and everything else you can imagine. Well, not everything else you can imagine, but everything reasonable you can imagine. Any other questions or that?
I was just going to say it's always a good idea just to stick a couple of Band-Aids and a gauze pad and a bandana in your pocket or in your pack in your day pack and just leave it there and use it when you need it. But on the group hikes, Justice is really good about making sure we've got all the stuff that we need if there's a major emergency in the group, that we can get it taken care of.
Awesome, guys. Well, yeah. Well, thanks for joining. And yeah, again, this is our first run through part 2 of the Nature Emergency Response Training class. Again, we put this on in an effort to try to bring some of this knowledge out to the public for free. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed it. Again, super open to feedback because this is the first run through. So please feel free to message me with any feedback or shout it out now, whatever works. Anyway, again, we're doing this virtually. Maybe someday this will develop into an in-person thing. But yeah, anyway, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justice.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Good night.